Chapter 1 of The Way to Willpower. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Way to Willpower by Henry Hazlitt. Chapter 1. A Revelation. You have seen the advertisements. The lion and the man are facing each other. The man upstanding, hands clenched, his look defiant and terrible. The lion crouching. Who will win? The man, without doubt. He has what the beast lacks: willpower. And at the bottom of the page is the triangular clipping which you cut out and send for the book on how to acquire it. Or perhaps the advertisement promises you a $10,000 a year position. Nothing less than $10,000 a year seems capable of attracting the present-day reader of 20-cent magazines. And those positions, one learns, are reserved for the men of willpower, not forgetting the capitals. The advertisements portray bizarre ideas about the will and willpower. Anyone who has the remotest notion of psychology might be led from them to suspect the advertised course. But the advertisements reflect not alone the advertiser's ideas, but the ideas of the plain man. They are written to catch the plain man's eye, and they do catch his eye. Else how to account for their persistence, their enlargement, and their multiplication, notwithstanding the notorious expensiveness of advertising? Now, I am about to reveal a profound secret about the will. The revelation will cause a good deal of shock and disappointment and a bedlam of protest. However, I derive courage to meet the protest because I have an imposing body of psychologic opinion behind me. I have behind me most of the reputable psychologic opinion since Herbert Spencer. And so, here it is. The will does not exist. I repeat it lest you fancy there has been a mistake. There is no such thing as the will, nor such a thing as willpower. These are merely convenient words. Now, when a man denies the existence of the will, he is on dangerous ground. It is as though he were to deny the existence of the tomato. Yet I do deny that the will exists in anything like the same sense that the tomato exists. The tomato is a definite entity. You can pick it up, handle it, feel it, or throw it at the person who denies its existence. And this evidence of reality may convince him. But I am not so crude nor so fatuous as to deny the existence of the will simply because you cannot feel it or taste it. I do not deny it simply because it is not material and tangible. I deny it because it is not even spiritual. The plain man's conception of the will is utterly and grotesquely wrong, and he must be shaken from it violently. The popular conception seems to be that the Creator, having decided that a man might want to have a brain to use upon occasion, bethought himself about the ingredients, and dropped in first a memory, then an imagination, then a will, and then a power to reason. Though popular conception is vague on the details, it is probable that the last was a small parcel, wrapped in prejudices to protect it from strain. But the Creator could have left out the will, and no one would have been the wiser. Proof of it is that so few of us were. It was only recently that psychologists began to suspect its absence. You are making a gesture of impatience. This is a little too stiff, you say. There is a limit to which you can impose on me. I know when a man shows a will and when he doesn't. I have met strong-willed men, and I have met weak-willed men, and I know the difference when I see it. For your remonstrance I have the greatest respect, and I will now proceed to give heed to it. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. The Intellect as a Valet. Having given some hint of what the will is not, it is now my pleasant duty to tell what it is. This may best be done by illustration. You resolve to abolish late nights. 2 nights out a week will be your limit. No night out later than midnight. It doesn't pay. A man loses sleep. He hurts his health. He isn't as fresh as he ought to be for work. He is just frittering his time away and getting nowhere and not improving himself evenings, and it's expensive, and... So, you resolve to cut it out. With a free conscience, you make your 2 engagements for the coming week. About Monday noon, Jones drops around at the office. There is a little game of poker towards some night that week when they can get the crowd together. Now, poker is marvelously fascinating. You haven't seen the boys for a long time, and you hate to lie to Jones and tell him all your nights are occupied for such a little reason. And you are ashamed to tell him the truth. That you have resolved to go out only 2 nights a week, come what may, might strike Jones as deliciously funny. He might tell the boys, who also have a sense of humor. And there is the possibility that Jones might be offended. So you look straight before you, undecided for a minute or 2, or you make feeble excuses, not your real ones, which are easily overridden by Jones, and you end up thinking to yourself that you will not count this week, or that you will make up for it the week after. And your dishonor is complete. Let us analyze this degrading incident. Man is a bundle of desires. He desires this and that and something else again. And the world is so constituted that, in nearly every instance, one desire cannot be attained save at the sacrifice of some other. This provoking state of affairs was long ago crystallized in the phrase that you cannot eat your cake and have it too. More broadly, it may be expressed in the phrase that everything we desire has its price. The price of a cake is $1. The price of keeping your dollar is the loss of a cake. This illuminating truth does not stop at the grossly material things, but the things whose prices can be measured in money. It extends throughout the spiritual universe. The price of earning $2 extra a day may be working an extra hour a day, which may be conceived either as the pain of an extra hour's work or as the loss of an hour's leisure. Conversely, the price of an hour's extra leisure a day is $2 a day. We are now coming to grips with our actual case. The price of staying out late at night is sleep, health, efficiency of business, money, self-improvement. That is, these are the things that the man must pay, lose, sacrifice in order that he may stay out late at night. Conversely, the price of sleep, health, efficiency of business, money, self-improvement is the pleasure of staying out late at night that one gives up. We have taken a devious course to arrive at our conclusion, yet we must deviate a little further before we come back. We must consider the intellect. For centuries we have glorified the intellect. We have put wreaths upon its head and sung its praises, which was quite absurd. For a man's intellect is a helpless, powerless sort of thing, a mere instrument, a tool, a subordinate which the desires boss around. It does the bidding of the desire that shouts the loudest. You may call this a libel on the intellect. You perhaps maintain the traditional view that the intellect directs the desires. But reflect. You engage daily in more or less unpleasant tasks for 8 hours. You work. It is your desire for bread and soup and café parfait, for an overcoat, an apartment, in theaters and golf that drives you there. You may protest that you enjoy your work. I shall not gainsay you. In either case, it is your desires that are dictating your action. The intellect merely obeys. If it is a good intellect, its owner may count himself fortunate. It will be better able to carry out the orders of its bosses, the desires. It will satisfy them more, and it will satisfy more of them. The intellect may, and often does, pick the road to a given place. The desires always dictate the designation. To multiply figures, the intellect is the steering wheel. The desires are the engine. The intellect is the pilot. The desires are the breeze. We are now ready to return to our immediate subject. When a man is engaged in what we call making a decision, the intellect may be thought to occupy a place of greater dignity. It may be imagined as acting as a judge between conflicting desires. But the position of the intellect is in reality one of profound humiliation. In deciding between desires, it is actually trying to make up its mind which desire is the stronger. it feels their muscles, so to speak, and it obeys the desire with the hardest biceps. Now, every decision is not merely a selection from among desires. One desire may be so overpowering that all others cringe before it. They are merely brushed out of the way. The function of the intellect, then, in making a decision is to select from alternative courses the one which most promises to fulfill this supreme desire. I could fancy you rebelling at this point, if in fact you have not done so long ago. What you say may be very true about some people, I can hear you saying. But suppose I refuse to allow my intellect to be bullied around in this shameless manner. Suppose I choose to have my intellect snap its fingers at all my desires and say, hereafter, I will be master. What becomes of all your fine analysis then? This question, my dear sir, is not so formidable as it looks. What it would amount to if you succeeded in carrying out your magnificent defiance, or rather, if you succeeded in thinking you had, would be that your desire, note the word, your desire to have your intellect master would overcome other desires or impulses, recognized by your intellect as such, which arose transiently from moment to moment. You would act only on the desires which your intellect happened to approve of. But that is merely another way of saying that your desire to act on the principles of common sense had overcome all other desires. For mark, there is nothing immoral in desires per se. There are good desires as well as evil. There are spiritual desires as well as material. There are desires to help others, to spread cheerfulness, to protect one's health, to live in moderation, to feel satisfied with one's lot, to succeed in life, to go to heaven, to feel the happiness that virtue gives. And these desires may be just as powerful as selfish desires, or as a craving for transient sensual pleasures. Bernard Shaw says somewhere that real goodness is nothing but the self-indulgence of a good man. Unfortunately, the word desire, taken by itself, has come in popular usage to have a restricted, a sensual, an evil meaning. Popular usage has perverted it just as it has perverted the word pleasure, which arouses such endless confusion of thought and ethical argument. I verily believe that could a man be brought to think of the word desire always in its true and broadest meaning, his aversion to the truth that the desires overlord the intellect would be completely removed. For, as a fact, I have greatly understated the predominance of the desires as compared with the intellect. The very existence of the intellect depends upon the desires. Unless a man have desires, he will have no intellect. Or rather, he will never develop it and never use it, which is much the same thing. Thinking is problem solving. It arises from thwarted purposes. If we have no desires, we can have no purposes, and hence, nothing to thwart. Thinking may arise as an attempt to solve something bearing on our immediate personal welfare, or on the welfare of our family, or our city, or on the welfare of mankind. It may arise from the love of prestige and applause, or from sheer intellectual curiosity. In any case, desire of some kind is the motivating force. A great difficulty yet remains. You may admit that the intellect is a servant and not a master, but not that it is the servant of your desires. It is the servant of me, you say. It is the servant of my will. These are two distinct, perhaps contradictory, assertions. Let us consider the first. Now, let me ask, what are you? You are nothing but a total. Take away your body. Take away your physical brain. Take away your intellect, your desires, your memory, your imagination. Take away, I say, all the parts and attributes of you, and there is nothing left. That should be obvious, so obvious that I almost blush to state it. Whenever you speak of me, or I, or you are speaking of one part or attribute of yourself, now of another. You may say, I intend to do so-and-so, meaning that a certain desire within you is going to make the rest of you do so-and-so. You say, I am running, meaning that your legs are running, carrying the rest of your body and your brain along with them. You say, I am thinking, meaning that your intellect is thinking. Your knees aren't thinking. Your feet aren't thinking. Your teeth aren't thinking. Only your intellect. In any case, when you refer to I, you are referring now to one part of yourself, now to another. And yet, such is the confusion of thought that because you give the same name now to one part and now to another, you fancy that the word I refers to something distinct from any of these, something in addition, something separable from the parts that compose it. But when you are talking of I in the foregoing sense, you are usually referring to your will, and it is this conception that we must now consider. The brain, as previously intimated, is a receptacle full of conflicting desires. All desires are not ever present, but that is not a point we need consider now. For certain periods, it may be only for a moment, perhaps for a day, possibly for half a lifetime, a certain desire will predominate. That desire, for just as long as it predominates, will determine action. For as long as it predominates and determines action, that desire constitutes your will. It is what you desire to do, what you want to do, what you will to do. But one desire may predominate for 1 hour, and another the next. Just now you may wish to sit home for the evening and improve your mind. That is your will. After reading this a few minutes, you may become bored. I am not blaming you. And may decide to call up your friends and play bridge for the evening. That is also your will. And here we come to the great confusion. These desires, which are constantly gaining individual supremacy and losing it, which are constantly overthrowing and dethroning each other like presidents in a South American republic, are each of them mere temporary holders of power. Yet, we give a permanent name to them. We call one desire the will, and we call the next desire the will. And so we think that the will is something in addition to these separate desires. If we were to say that Warren G. Harding kissed Mrs. Harding, and then were to add that the President of the United States also kissed Mrs. Harding, the confusion between words and things would be obvious. The President of the United States we know to be only another name for Harding. It is merely a permanent name for the different temporary holders of that powerful office, all of different natures. So with the mind. The will is merely a name for the desire that happens to hold temporary power. Take away all desires, and there remains no will. End of chapter 2.